What's happening, gangsters? It's a sunny afternoon here at Rube Goldberg Enterprises, and I am taking a slightly slower day today, which are typically days that I like to make videos. I've been working pretty hard on a project that has finally gotten to the fun part, and that is the wonderful Dragon 132nd ME109 that I'm building for a Kitmaker Network video blog. And as you could maybe see there in that quick view, I'm doing decals. And so I decided that since I had all of my decal supplies right here at hand, that I would make a video about decals. Now, why would I do that? There's lots of information out there about decals. Well, I sort of got challenged by one of the members of the Scale Modelers critique group not too long ago to make a video about tamiya decals in particular. You would have to pretty much be living under a rock to not know that a lot of people think tamiya decals are terrible. I mean, I know people who would rather have bamboo splinters shoved under their fingernails and set on fire than ever use tamiya decals. Now, I personally haven't had any trouble with them. They can be a little thick and maybe they have a little more carrier film than we might like sometimes, but as far as actually getting them on there, I haven't had any trouble. So I got challenged to make a video of doing exactly that, and so I thought, hey, let's do a little decal science. Now, I'm a good person to test out the quality of any decal because my method is honestly pretty barbaric. And I'll explain why. I don't heat my water. I don't use special water. I don't say spells. I don't hold my tongue a particular certain way. I keep the exact same jar of decal water. You can see right here, it says on it, Decal H2O. I keep this jar sitting on my shelf for as long as it takes for it to get polluted with lots of little tiny bits of decal film, and then I'll change it out. And last time I did that, it took about a year. So it's whatever temperature the room happens to be. Now, the only thing that's special about it is that I've got a little bit of micro set in it. Now, the reason that I do that is because I had some handy that I needed to get rid of, but normally you can just add white vinegar to your decal water. That's basically what microset is. And if you're confused about which it is, microset, microsol, just keep in mind this way. The one that smells like vinegar is microset, and it's in the blue bottle. Microsol, which is the thing you might use before you resort to solvaset, is in the red bottle. And the order of application for microset and microsol is always blue before red. Now, anyway, it's an old school model making trick to add vinegar to your excuse me, to your throat, to your decal water, because while some people say it softens the decal, I personally believe that what it really does is just reduce the surface tension a little bit so that the decals will move around a little bit easier. But it may also help to soften up the adhesive, which, as I understand it from my bit of Googling around about decals, is basically cornstarch. That's what they use to stick these things to the decal paper. So that's why I have my decal water jar that I keep all the time, because I don't want to have to keep adding vinegar or microset or whatever to it to make it nice and tasty for application of decals. So that's the first part of my decal barbarism. The second part is that as much as possible, I like to put the decals straight on the paint. I know that some of you guys are freaking out just hearing me say that. Calm down, it's going to be okay. I know that for most people the formula is to apply a gloss varnish and then decal over that, because the idea being that it prevents silvering. And there's some validity to that, because in theory a gloss varnish makes things smoother, unless your paint was rough to start with, and then all you're going to get with a layer of gloss varnish is just bigger, shinier bumps. So it's not a guarantee that it's going to stop orange peel. It's not a guarantee that it's going to stop silvering. So for that reason, I don't worry about it. But the main reason why I put my decals straight on the paint is because I like to do all of my weathering straight to the paint if I can, and I want to weather the decals at the same time. Now, the reason that I do that is because that's how it happens in real life. Unless the vehicle in question has a layer of varnish on it, which, unless we're talking about automotive clear coats, they don't. Certainly not World War II aircraft or tanks or whatever. The weathering doesn't happen on a layer of varnish. And I try to mimic the natural processes that happen in nature as much as possible. I feel like that gives a more authentic result. So, because I want to do that, and because most of the weathering products that I use interact with the paint layer more effectively than they do with a varnish layer, I like to get it all done before I ever even put a layer of varnish on. And that cuts down on the number of layers of varnish that I have to use, which I certainly don't object to, because that's just work I don't have to do. So anyway, that's why I say my decal method is so barbaric, because of my very unhygienic decal water practices and my insistence on going straight to the paint. Now, as far as that second thing goes, look, if you have any uncertainty about the smoothness of your paint or the sturdiness of your paint or anything like that, then absolutely go ahead and put a layer of clear gloss like aqua gloss on there first, or Tamiya X22, dusted with Mr. Leveling Thinner or whatever it is that you like for gloss, because it will make a more solid surface. I live a little more dangerously, so anyway, don't mistake what I'm saying as a recommendation. That's just how I roll. So anyway, here's what I've got for my little decal test that reflects all of what I've just said. I've got a sheet of decals, and these are from the venerable Tamiya 132nd Mustang. Hopefully that's focusing there, and you can see right there it says Tamiya, so these are in fact Tamiya decals. And I have one wing that I have chopped off of a Revell 132nd Spitfire, which is a whole other story, and it's got a layer of Tamiya black-green on it and nothing else except for the primer underneath it. There is no varnish, nothing whatsoever on this. You can see, hopefully, if I hold it in the correct light, how flat it is. So, there we go. We have two things for this little test. And so, let's get started. Let's see what happens. Okay, so here we go. Now, here's what I'm going to test. And let me say this before I get started. The reason why I chose this Revell 132nd Spitfire as the test subject is because it's got tons and tons of lovely recessed rivet and panel line detail. And what we want to see is how well the decals settle into that detail. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Now, the first thing that I do is I like to take the decal, grab it with my gripper tweezers, and then I go over here and I dip it in the decal water. Now I may leave it sitting in there for a minute while I grab another one with another pair of decal tweezers. I kind of like to keep a couple of them going so that I can move a little bit more efficiently. But then once it's had at least, a few seconds to soak, what I do is I just take it out and let it rest there. You can see I've just got it resting there on top of the jar, and that way while it's softening, I'm not having to worry about it getting loose from the paper and floating around inside my jar because I'm sure you guys have all enjoyed the fun of chasing a decal around in, that's gotten loose. So anyhow, now one thing that you can do to alleviate that, if you're not dumb like me, is you can put your decal water into a shallow vessel like this. This is just the lid from my decal water jar, and I'm gonna just take this decal and get it in there and get it nice and wet. Now, I'm only going to do these 3 right now because I'm saving the 4th sample for some warm water because I want to see if that really makes any difference. Now, while these are sort of getting happy and ready to slide off the paper, let me point out that I've got here my jar of Solvacet, and here I've got a little cap full of Microsol. I just got reminded of something, learned the hard way. It's a good idea to pour the Microsol out into something small before you start dipping a brush into it. Otherwise, you will knock the damn jar over and spill Microsol all over your workbench like I did about an hour ago. And that's no fun. So, anyway, now that I've been running my yap for a minute, let's see if these are ready to come off of the paper. Not quite long enough, so we'll let those sit in the water for a little while longer. See if this one's any better. Nope, they're not ready, and that's fine. Decaling is something that I like to take slow. I like to put on an audiobook on my iPhone and just sort of lose myself in the process and take my time with it because, look, decaling can be stressful. Sometimes, things don't always go as well as you want to. They come flying, they come off the paper. You have to chase them around. They get curled up, they get wrinkled, they do all kinds of stupid things, and it can be pretty stressful. But that's what I do. So I also want to show that it is, let's see here, that doesn't show up very well. Anyway, it's 3:08 p.m. and in the afternoon. So that's going to become important because I want us to be able to see, how long it takes for the chemicals that we're going to use to do their business. All right, are we ready yet? Could we please go ahead? Okay, so there we go. That was enough more time to get things going. So there we go. We're just sliding that one on there. And now we'll do this one. I'm going to position them so that I get at least one good panel line running right through the middle of it. Okay, so those are all on about equal footing. I'm not going to extend any of them over the joint with the aileron because that doesn't happen all that often, sometimes. But I think we've got a pretty decent sort of sampling here for these 3 pieces. Now, what I then do sometimes, just sort of depends if I feel like it, if there's enough water involved, is then I'll come along with a Q-tip and I'll just vacuum away the excess water so that things happen a little faster. I live in a really dry climate, so I don't have to wait too long for the decal water to go away. But sometimes, if I want to make sure that the water's out from underneath it, at least for big decals like this, then I'll do this sort of business. And maybe I should do it more. You know, I think you get better results if you do squeegee that water out from under there. So let's just do that. Let me start now being less barbaric about my decals. Okay, so there we go. That is pretty well squeegeed down. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this dry before I go to the next step, which will be to apply some chemicals. And while I'm waiting for that to happen, I'm going to go heat up some water for the other decal. Okay, so what I did is I just went and ran some warm water out of the tap. So this, and I just put it in this dirty old dish right here. And it doesn't have anything else in it. I'm not adding any vinegar or micro set or anything. It's just warm. Now, is it the right temperature? Hell, I don't know. I hear people talk about using a coffee cup warmer for this purpose. But I don't know what the right temperature is. Okay, so this is just, you know, warm enough that when I stick my finger in it, I can feel that it's pretty warm. Now, maybe that means it's warmer than I think it is. My fingers don't feel things all that perfectly, but we know that it's warm. I don't have a thermometer handy, or we would see exactly how warm it is, but I honestly don't think that that really makes all that much difference. Otherwise, I wouldn't be telling you that I do it with room temperature water. So, anyhow, we'll see what happens. While that's sitting there doing its thing, let's go ahead and apply some juice to these others. Now this one over here on the left, I'm going to apply nothing. This one here in the middle, I'm going to slather with Solvacet, which generally is my favorite decal solvent, decal setter, whatever you want to call it. They call it decal setting solution. That's what they say is right there on the side of the jar. And it's strong stuff, and we'll talk more about that in a second. Micro Sol is, I think, probably the same stuff, but not nearly as powerful. And that's what I'm brushing on this section of decal film. Right there, you can see it's still moving around a little bit. No big deal. So we're going to watch what happens. Now, while we were doing that, I expect that this one that's in the warm water here is ready to come out. Yep, it's ready to go. So we're going to put it right up there. Okay. And all right, this time let's do a little paper towel action to get the water out from underneath this last one that we put down. One reason that I don't like to use paper towel, and why I don't like to really do this much at all, is because I don't want to move them around. But that's just because I am clumsy. Okay, now let's zoom in here. You can see that I did this just less than a minute ago, and it's just a few minutes later. It's now about 5 minutes later than when we started this experiment. So let's sort of zoom in here and take a really close look at what's happening. Okay, you can see that this decal here, hopefully you can see, let's get in really close. The Solvacet decal is starting to wrinkle up a little bit, which is pretty much what I would expect. The Micro Sol decal is not wrinkling as much. which again is consistent with what I would expect. Now, one reason that people talk about or dislike, I think, doing decals straight on the paint is because they correctly say that these fluids will leave a mark on the finish. And in fact, it does. You can see that right here. It's happening all over the place. I happen to like that. I just sort of take it as part of the weathering process. So I don't mind that look. But that's another good reason to use a clear varnish if that's going to bother you. I just happen to like to let all sorts of things happen to my paint as it will, because I believe that that kind of mimics what happens in real life. So I don't get freaked out about that at all. I mean, look, things get wet. They get, they get rained on, they get snowed on, they get, whatever. So anyhow, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just watch this now for a little bit. Well, let's take another quick look. These are drying out a little bit, so I guess I'll leave them alone. What I have found is that sometimes you have to do more than one application of one of these setting solutions. I think some people expect it to work magic immediately, and they get freaked out when it doesn't. Look, I've had decals that required 4 and 5 applications of Solvaset over a 1 or 2 hour period of time before they finally settled down the way that I wanted them to. So, you just have to be patient, and sometimes they do have to be sort of babied along. That's been the case with the decals that I'm putting on this BF109, and I actually had a situation occur that I've never had before, which I think is worth mentioning while we're just waiting for this stuff to do what it's going to do. Let me see if I can grab this thing. Now, these are Dragon decals, and I've never used Dragon decals before. This is my first Dragon kit. The decals are really nice. They're very thin, not much carrier film, and they look pretty good right now. You can see I've got a couple of little bubbles there that I need to work on, but you can see that one has settled down into the rivets really nicely. But things weren't looking that good right off the bat. Let me flip it over and see what things look like on the bottom. Yes. Okay, now it's better. Okay, but if you look at this one, you can see that I've got a pretty horrible situation there. And that happened pretty quickly after I applied the Solvaset. And I quickly decided that maybe Solvaset was a little too strong for these decals. And that's one reason why I always start on the bottom, because if something like that happens, I'm better off, especially in this case, because this BF109 is going to be posed as a crashed aircraft, and it's going to be sitting on its belly in the grass, and no one's ever going to see these bottom decals anyway. So I'm not worried about that at all. You can see that that one is just fine. No issues there. I was clear over into the ones on the top wing before I discovered that things were not looking good. Fortunately, I didn't have nearly as much Solvaset on the top ones as I did on the bottom ones for whatever reason. And things didn't get too sideways on the top ones. And so what I did is, as soon as the Solvaset dried, I came back and I switched to Microsol. And so that's what's gotten me to where I'm at with the ones on the top here. And you can see, like here on the fuselage, I've used nothing but a Solvaset on those, and they look pretty good. But that's 2 or 3 applications of Solvaset, and I'm still going to come back and score those panel lines just to make sure that everything is bedded down the way that it needs to be. So sometimes, you just have to sort of roll with it and baby these things along and, you know, not get too wigged out. And look, worst things, you know, worst possible situation. And again, this is another reason why I like to do decals directly on the paint. Let's say the worst possible thing happened and one of these just was unrecoverable. Look, if I can't yank it off of there with a piece of masking tape, or when I do, if it yanks some of my paint off along with it, all I've got to do is rub that out and repaint that area, which is no big deal when you're working right there on the paint. But if I've already gone and put a coat of clear gloss varnish on that and something bad happens, and it is possible to yank paint off with masking tape even though it's been varnished, I'm in a much worse situation with having to repair that. So, look, I'm really not trying to sell you on doing your decals straight to the paint. I have my reasons and my justifications, but they're mine. So, anyway, let's take a look now at where we are with this part of the experiment. You can see that it's drying and settling down. This one that I applied over here with room temperature water ain't done shit. It's just sitting there like, what's up? I'm just laying around doing nothing. Hadn't soaked into that panel line whatsoever. But this may be what converts me to using warm water. Look at this one that I just laid down here with warm water. Look how much better it's doing. It's like relaxed. It's like, man, I've been laying around in this warm bath. I'm just chilling, and look at me. I'm just going to drape myself all over this panel line. Now, I don't think that's good enough that I wouldn't want to use some setting solution, but it's definitely an interesting sort of development there. Now, let's go back here. Let's look again. See this one here that's got micro sol on it? It's not settling down particularly well. And this is what I mean by sometimes it takes more than one application. So, since it's starting to dry out, what I'm going to do is just come back over here in my little lid of solution and just very gently brush that on again. What I'm really looking for is when the entire decal starts to wrinkle up. And that's the point where a lot of people lose their mind. They think everything has just gone south and the world has ended. But that's a normal part of the process. They will go back to normal even if they look like a prune. It's not a big deal. That's just part of the deal. Okay, now I'm going to do a little more Solvaset on this one. I think it's dried out and it's... Yep, now there's where you have to be careful coming back with a second application. If you look, I just created a little problem there with my brush because the material is so soft. So that would be a case where maybe I shouldn't have gotten so antsy and gone for a second application of Solvaset. But again, I don't worry too much about something like that because I'm going to just incorporate that into the weathering. If it were a situation where I absolutely couldn't live with it, then I'd have to fix it, no doubt. So what I'm going to do then is just leave these alone because obviously I need to stop messing with it. And we're going to just go take a break. And let's see, it's 10 minutes later than it was last time we looked. So I'll go take a break. We'll come back to it when these are all bedded down and we'll wrap this thing up. Okay, I'm back and it is about 20 after 4, so just about an hour later than when we left off of this experiment. And the results are nice. Let's take a look at what we've got here. Okay, as we would expect, the decal that was put down with just room temperature water and nothing else still looks pretty lazy. It's sunk in there a little bit, but not much. Now we move over here to the one that was put down with room temperature water and Solvaset, and it looks very nice. It has settled into every detail very effectively, as has the other one that was put down with room temperature water and microsol. I admit to being a little bit surprised because it didn't, it was definitely behind in the race when we left it before, and it definitely caught up and looks good. Now, the last one that was applied with nothing but warm water actually doesn't look too bad. It's settled into a lot of those details a bit. Still not as good as the ones that were treated with setting solution, but not too bad. So, I think that sort of one of the conclusions here is that as far as setting solutions go, in this case, the results were about equal, and you can see what happens when you don't use either one. Okay, so there you go. A little decal testing. Now, what did we prove? Honestly, not much. And I don't know that I was really out to prove anything, because here's the thing. Even though I could say, well, look, I've demonstrated right here on camera that tamiya decals are perfectly workable, well, this doesn't really prove that, because this is one sampling of tamiya decals from one tamiya decal sheet. And it's important to keep in mind with these things that just like these model kit companies don't, at least in most cases I think, own their own molding presses or their own tool and die shops, they also don't produce their own decals. They use subcontractors, which is why with a lot of kits you get decals that say printed by Cartograph. And even some of the Tamiya kits, like some of their car kits, include decals from Cartograph. So not only are you getting decals from subcontractors, but look, like any business relationship, that's prone to change over time. So who knows if the contractor that made these decals is even the same contractor that made the ones from any of their other kits. I mean, there's just no way to know, honestly. There's a pretty high probability that they're different from people who made the decals 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So, look, who really knows? That's the main reason why this proves nothing. But I do think we learned some things. And that is that it is possible to get a good result with Tamiya decals, and that it is possible to get equally good results, at least on this decal sheet, with either Solvaset or microsol. Now, I myself prefer Solvaset, but as I was showing you guys with the BF109 project, sometimes it's a little stronger even than you need. Sometimes it's not even quite strong enough and you have to hit it multiple times. Now, the one thing that I learned that I was really surprised by is that hot water does definitely make a difference, as we saw on this sample right here. But again, it wasn't good enough that I would have foregone using a setting solution. Let me take another look at it. I mean, I'm impressed. It looks pretty good, but it's nowhere near as good as the result that I got using a setting solution. You just don't have that painted on look. So again, yeah, it's impressive that it did so much better than my room temperature water, but it doesn't matter because it wasn't good enough for me to change my process and forego setting solution. Now, we've also sort of learned peripherally that sometimes these things just have to be babied along. I showed you the decals on the BF109, and I definitely had some issues. Some of those bubbles that I had while I was away letting the other decals set, I came back and just very carefully drug a sharp knife point through the bubbles that I had on these insignia. And I think you can hopefully see there that things turned out fine on those. I also went and drug my knife point through the panel lines right there on the fuselage, and you can see that those have settled in quite nicely. I brushed a very light coat of microsol over all of those places after I scored them with a knife point. So again, back to my statement earlier that sometimes you just have to baby these things along, and they may not just be a set it and forget it kind of affair. So like anything, there's no guarantees and no rules that apply to every single situation. So anyway, I thought this was kind of cool and fun to do. I'm a sucker for science experiments. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. And if you're still watching, as always, I appreciate it. All right, guys, take care. Much love.